The last thing they dealt with, and we deal with it right now, is the idea of spiritists and mediums and diviners. And this is what it says here in Isaiah chapter 8. When men tell you to consult mediums and spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? To the law and to the testimony. If they do not speak according to this word, they have no light of dawn. And that's that same challenge that we have now. People going everywhere else but to God. They're looking for answers, especially in troubling times, in changing times. Who's going to give us answers into the unknown? Right? Who's going to give us direction? Who's going to give us counsel? So current events of the day, right, it really affected what the Israelites are going and their condition of their hearts. And it helps. It either helps if you look beyond it and see God, and if your heart is stretching forward and is contrite and broken, God begins to paint a really great picture of Jesus, and you're compelled to follow Him. But if the current events just grab your attention, and your heart is twisted, and it's kind of tainted with other things, it's hard to see Christ clearly, enough to pull you and follow Him. So let's take a look at the next part. The images of the coming Messiah that's in Isaiah. First, this is a little bit of recap. It kind of knocked him off. Ever kind of been in a situation, like, especially in language, when I'm learning a new language, is if I don't catch it right away, that phrase, I'm forever catching up. If it was German, if it was Russian, or whatever it was, if I didn't understand that word completely, I spend the next 15 minutes trying to figure out what does that word mean, and this person's talking still. And I don't know where the conversation's going, right? And I think that's the same way it was with the Israelites. When Isaiah said, a child will be born. And right, they were just knocked off their, kind of like, we weren't expecting a child. So everything about the Messiah they didn't understand because it didn't start the way they wanted it to. Kind of just dazed them. Ever been in that situation where you kind of daze right off and everything goes off? But he talked about it. Isaiah said, for unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. The idea that this one who would come would have hints of the Trinity already. And he would just encompass everything we need. A counselor, a prince, a father, everything. He talked about it, set it out there for us to see. Also told him that this Messiah to come would be as meek as a lamb, obedient completely to the end. As Adam wasn't obedient, Jesus would be obedient, right? He would be obedient. He would fulfill God's purposes and His plans for His life. So that righteousness would then be imputed to us. Ones who could not fulfill, whose hearts are always wayward. Jesus was completely faithful to the end. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet He did not open His mouth. Continued to say yes to God. Your will be done. He was led to the sheep to a slaughter. The last part kind of in that picture he saw is that He would become a sacrifice. And that sacrifice would restore us. It would secure our rescue and our restoration before God. Isaiah 53, surely He took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows. Yet we considered Him stricken by God, smitten by Him and afflicted. But He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon Him, and by His wounds we are healed. That's the image that kind of Isaiah was putting out there for his people at their time. Some kind of like, okay, received, some didn't. The other part he was kind of showing that this would be a kingdom that Jesus would be part of that would never end. And I just want to stop and just think about this a little bit. In Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7, it says, on the increase of His government, and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over His kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on forward. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. This is the prophecy He made. He said as soon as He shows up, He establishes His kingdom, and it will continue to increase. And I think that's what we're challenged. We live in that time after the cross and kind of before His second coming, is that we need to grab onto the fact that God is always about increasing increasing the reign, the prosperity, the culture, the impact of this kingdom. And it's got to be in our eyes, in the close circle of friends we have, and in the opportunities He gives us to share that. But that's the truth. I think we let go of that sometimes because we're living in a very pluralistic culture now, right? But the truth of the matter is, God said it, that the increase of His government will not end. It will continue to go. Increasing and growing. Paul said this also in Colossians when he's speaking to the new believers there. It applies to also. It says all over the world, this gospel is bearing fruit and growing. Just as it has been doing among you since the day you heard it and understood God's grace in all its truth. And so this is what we need to understand. We live in that time when He was painting that picture of the future of the Messiah's kingdom. He showed that He came and He suffered and we are justified in Him. But He talked about this time when His kingdom, when His family will be increased. And we're part of that. And I think we need to make sure we hang on to that. We need to see that clearly. Because for whatever reason, God has chosen His church, this church, all people to say we are followers of God. He's chosen us to do the expanding, to doing the increasing. Right? There's no other groups. We're not trying to come through government. It's not going to come through an NGO, a non-government organization. It's not going to come through humanitarian efforts. It's through His body. And people who really say, I'm a follower of Christ. And we need to get a hold of that. That's where increase comes. And it's not only increase in numbers, it's the fruit. It's the character. It's pushing back darkness and seeing light dawn in places. One thing I think we need to get a hold of is that the church never lacks opportunities to do this. It's just we don't step up. We don't really see it. We're distracted. Our attention's someplace else. But if the government, if His kingdom is always increasing, there are always opportunities for it to increase. Our role is to find out what is our place. What are you giving us to do? Who are the people in my sphere of influence that I can begin to share with and help bring His wholeness and His healing and His comfort to? The heart condition and the vision of what the kingdom looks like, those are the keys, right, to expanding the kingdom. It's just our heart condition, focused on Him, and a vision to say, yeah, you can accomplish it, God. Those are the keys. And that's great because it doesn't depend on how much money we have, how connected we are, what even country you live in. Right? It doesn't matter. God's kingdom is advancing and we can say yes to it. So, kind of sketches now of the king and the reigning kingdom that comes to be solved. I just want to take a look at that real quickly.